Today I'm going to cover how to make sprouted wheat bread from scratch. I'll start by sprouting the wheat, making the dough, and baking the bread in various forms. I first learned this process from a video by Everything Homemade. If you'd like to watch the original, as well as get the timestamps for my video, please check the description box below. This is day 1 of sprouting the wheat. Fill a large bowl with wheat berries. I'm using hard red winter wheat, but you can use spelt or any other kind of wheat that you'd prefer. Unlike making regular bread, the quantities of ingredients that you use for this do not matter. There's only one main ingredient, so you choose as much as you think you'll need. I chose to fill the whole bowl because I wanted enough bread to last for breakfast through the week. Wash, rinse, and drain the grains several times. If you look closely, you'll probably notice that I have some grains of white rice mixed in my bowl. This was not intentional, nor do I recommend this. I do recommend storing your bags separately though, so you don't confuse them like I did. One of the most useful tools I have while making this bread is this strainer. It's just a fine mesh strainer that you can get anywhere, but it's really helpful for draining the grains. After your grains are thoroughly washed, cover them with water and let them soak for about 12 hours. I'm not sure if it makes a lot of difference, but I let my grains sit out on the counter where they can get a little bit of sunlight through the window. This is day 3 of sprouting the wheat. I accidentally forgot to film day 2, but the process is the same for both days. As you can see, my wheat has expanded quite a bit. I'm now taking it into a second bowl so I can make sure that I thoroughly wash it. After the wheat soaks for about 12 hours, make sure to drain it really well. If you don't, you'll start to drown the wheat and it can get moldy really fast. This is what the sprouts should look like on day 3. You can see that they've sprouted a decent sized tail. This is how you know that they're definitely ready to go. The length of the sprouts absolutely affects the texture of the bread. The longer the sprout is, the gooier the bread is. I tend to prefer to make my bread on day 3 because I find the texture has a nice soft center. If you would rather your bread to have a firmer texture, go ahead and make it on day 2, but play around with the recipe to see what stage of sprouting you prefer. It is essential that after the first soak, you wash your sprouts every 12 hours. I know it sounds a little silly, but each time you wash the sprouts, be sure to smell them. I learned the hard way on this one. I noticed that the sprouts were smelling a little bit off, but I wasn't sure exactly what was going on. So I made the bread anyway, thinking that it might just be a smell that I wasn't used to. I didn't realize it, but that smell was actually my sprouts being a little bit moldy. It took me hours to get that smell out of my house, and the bread was inedible. Ever since I started thoroughly draining the sprouts after every time I wash them, and washing them more frequently, the sprouts have a sweeter smell. I would compare it almost to watermelon. The best way to know that your sprouts are clean are to be able to see the actual sprouts through the water. Right here you can see that my water is really cloudy. I'll continue to rinse and drain this until I can see them through. It'll never be 100% perfect, but this is way too cloudy. I've repeated this rinsing and washing step several times at this point, and this is about as clear as the water is going to get. You can still see the grains, but it doesn't have as much white cloudiness as it did the first time. At this point, I'm going to drain as much of the water as possible and let it sit on the counter until I'm ready to start making the dough. Now it's time to make the dough. I'm using an Omega juicer for this, but you could probably use your food processor. I've added the attachment that does not have the slots for the juice to come through. Place a large bowl under the juicer to catch the dough as it's being made. Using a slotted spoon, take your sprouts and put them into the top of your juicer. The juicer will grind up the sprouts into a paste, and this is what's going to form the dough. Continue with this step until all of the sprouts have been ground up. Now that you have your dough, we're going to start flavoring it. I'm doing 2 different kinds of doughs today. The first one will be cinnamon raisin. Everything in this recipe is to taste. I added a ton of cinnamon, so much that it formed a cloud. Feel free not to use that much or to use more. Next, I'm using some agave for some sweetness. You can omit this if you don't want it to have any sugar. Lastly, go ahead and add the raisins, again, as much as you want. Now that everything's added, it's time to mix. The dough is very sticky, so keep a bowl of clean water there to keep the dough off of your hands. Knead the dough until everything is fully incorporated. For this dough, I'm going to shape it into a loaf. I'm going to bake the loaf in a pie pan. So the dough doesn't stick, I'm going to sprinkle the bottom with fine ground cornmeal. If you don't have cornmeal, poppy seeds and whole wheat flour would work as well. Make sure the bottom of the pan is extremely well covered, otherwise good luck getting it out of there. Shape your loaf in the pan and it's ready for baking. However it looks in the pan is how it's going to look when it comes out the oven. With my second bowl of dough, I'm going to make some bagels. Start by preheating your oven to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Then coat a baking sheet with some cornmeal or poppy seeds. Next, you'll start forming the dough balls. You can make these any size you want. I like to make mine mini bagels. Just like when you were kneading the dough, it's helpful to have a bowl of water nearby to keep the dough from sticking to your hands. Form as many dough balls as you are able to get from your dough. Try to make the dough balls as even in size as possible. Don't worry too much if they are not all exactly the same size. You can fix this at the end by adjusting some of the sizes. Now you will take each individual dough ball and shape them into a bagel. Poke a hole in the center of each ball and then round out the shape. Take the newly formed bagel and dip it into the topping of your choice. Here I am doing sesame seeds. When the bagel is thoroughly coated, add more cornmeal to the place that you are going to put it back down. Just like with the loaf, good luck getting these off of the pan if you don't have enough cornmeal or poppy seeds. Continue this for each bagel and mix up the toppings if you choose. When you've finished your tray of bagels, put this tray, as well as the loaf, in the oven at 250 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 hours. Because the temperature of the oven is so low, it does not matter that both of these will be on different racks. They are not going to get burnt whether they're on the top or the bottom, so it doesn't matter how you put them in. When you take these out of the oven, you may be surprised to see that they are still a bit gooey on the inside. Feel free to bake them a little bit longer if you want them to have a harder consistency. The bread and the bagels are finally out of the oven. You can see that when I break open one of the bagels, it's still a little bit sticky on the inside. Leave them in the oven longer if you want them to be firmer. Both the bagels and the bread have a crispy exterior when they're finished. You can see when I poke the bread, it springs right back up. Both of these breads are incredibly filling and make a great addition to any meal or a great breakfast on their own. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe for more content like this.